What's good, YouTube? Welcome to my channel. In this particular video, I'm going to be doing another brief horary demonstration on how to locate missing objects. I do have another video on my channel that I uploaded about a few months ago that is going to be much more descriptive and technical and educational in terms of how to locate missing objects because I go over all of the main rules of Horary astrology, as well as the significations for missing objects and what to look for and what planet describes what and what the sign describes. And so in this video, I'm going to be applying a lot of that particular knowledge in terms of what helped me locate my ID. So on August the 7th, I realized that I misplaced my ID. I was in the store about to purchase something that required for me to have an ID, and I was looking in my wallet and I just didn't find it. And I was like, well, where could it be? Because you don't just go out pulling out your ID all the time. You're like, you know, I don't know. I was like, unless you have to, but I couldn't like recall like a previous time where I had to pull out of my ID and for me to have lost it. And so I immediately wrote down the time that I recalled that it was missing. And once I got home, I casted a chart for my missing ID. And I basically asked the cosmos, where is my ID? And um I I casted the chart, and when I first looked at the chart, I was a bit confused. Not confused, but one thing I'll say about me is that as an astrologer, I much rather prefer to read for other people because when it comes to my own chart and my own life, sometimes I can just be too emotionally invested, especially if it's a situation that is intense. Like this isn't intense, but I was getting ready to move and relocate. And so I was like, I need to have my ID. I don't want to have to go through this again with having to order another ID and do all this and stuff. So I was kind of agitated. So I casted a chart, and let me just go ahead and pull that up right here. Share screen. So I casted a chart, and this is the chart that was casted, and I used this chart to help me to determine where my ID was. Now the universe has a very funny way of bringing things to be because the way I found my ID was in such a unsuspecting way, and I haven't necessarily looked at this chart from that advantage. But just to jump right into it, whenever you ask a question and it's about your missing property, you are always going to be represented by the ascendant and the sign that's rising, which in this case is 19 degrees Scorpio. Your If it's a piece of property that you can move and that you can take with you, then it's going to be, and that piece of property is going to be represented by the second house and its ruler. Also, missing objects are also represented by the fourth house and its ruler, which in this case is going to be Saturn in Pisces retrograde. And we also like to liken the missing object to a planet that naturally governs that object, which in this case, Mercury rules paperwork, IDs, and things of that nature. And so this is important to do as soon as you come to the chart because you want to know who your players are. Because in a horary chart, not every planet is going to be necessary to analyze and look at. You want to narrow it down. So in this case, since 19 degrees 45 minutes of Scorpio is rising, I'm going to be represented by Mars in Virgo in the 10th house. Because Sagittarius is on the second house cusp, my license is going to be represented by Jupiter in Taurus in the seventh house. It's in the seventh house because it's within 5 degrees of the seventh house cusp. So we're going to go ahead and give this to the 7th, 15, 16, 17, 18. Yes, and within 5 degrees. And also in this case, Saturn in Pisces is in the fourth house retrograde. And so these are going to be the players for my ID: Mercury, Jupiter, and Saturn. And the moon in any horary chart is going to represent the flow of events and how things are going to come to be. And the general outcome of the question is going to be represented by the fourth house. It's particularly the third triplicity ruler of the fourth house. And so, as you can see, I'm Mars and I'm here in the 10th house with Mercury. The 10th house will represent a public place. And being with Mercury in a Mercury sign, that can represent a transaction. So I was in a public place and I was making a transaction, and I could have been involved in communicating with someone and talking to someone while I at the time that I misplaced my ID. And another thing is that Jupiter, ruler of the second, is in the seventh, which can represent other people. So I'm thinking, okay, this had to be a situation where I was directly talking to somebody else within a public place, and that could have been where I lost my ID. And when I first saw this, I was happy because the angularity of the first, fourth, seventh, and the 10th, and a lot of times will suggest that the item will be found because the angles are the pivots of the chart. Um, Now, again, Jupiter, representing my license, is in the seventh house, which is the house of the other person. So I said, well, maybe my idea is with somebody else, it's with another person. And, at first, you don't know where it's at. You're like, maybe it's in my home, maybe it's in my car, maybe it fell in between the seats or something. But as you can see by this chart, that wasn't the case, because if it was in my home, then it would have been represented, it would have been in the first house or maybe even the fourth house. But it was in the seventh and the 10th. And a lot of times the seventh and the 10th don't point to spaces that are occupied by you, the query. The seventh house can point to your partner, like it may be with your partner's belongings, but I don't have a partner. And the 10th house could point to the item being in a work location, but I don't bring my ID into my work location. I typically leave that concealed, and I don't take it with me because I don't like my wallet to be anyways. But it wasn't there. So I knew it was in a store. And the interesting thing about the seventh house is that the seventh house can represent the color black, and it can represent where something may be um near a wall or a partition. And Jupiter is in Taurus. Now, when it comes to horary astrology and missing objects, when you find a missing object in a fixed sign, it can indicate that the item wants to stay put, that it is hidden. Um, and also, as you can see, Mars, which is going to be me, recently separated from Jupiter via a trine. They're only 3 degrees apart from each other. So this is showing a recent separation from the ID. And it's showing that the ID is in a location and it hasn't changed places. It should still be there because, again, Jupiter is in a solid or immovable sign, and it's in a house that's going to be represented by other people or another person in particular. Now, I knew that I was going to find the ID for really two reasons. I think I might have three, but the two reasons was that Mercury, the other significator for the ID, it's applying to me. Mercury is in 12 Virgo, I'm 17 Virgo, and Mercury is moving towards me. One of the ways that you can know that a matter is going to come to be in a horary chart is if the the planet that represents you, and the planet that represents the thing are coming together. Now, there are some cases where that may not be true because there are things such as reformation or prohibition that may interfere with that. But in this case, there's nothing that's going to interfere with Mercury and Mars coming together. And um, also, the fourth house ruler represents missing objects because the fourth house can represent buried treasure. And here we have Saturn retrograde in the fourth house. And so retrograde planets get a bad rep in natal astrology. Well, not in natal astrology, but in electional astrology and in natal astrology, they can. But when it comes to missing objects, that is the one time where you do want to see a planet retrograde because it can represent that that item is moving back towards you. So the item was moving back towards me. So that was another thing that let me know that, hey, I'm going to get this item. And because Saturn is in the fourth house, I said, well, it looks like the item again is hidden and it's in a location that is away from view. Um, and so I was continuing to look at the chart, continuing to pay special attention, especially to this 10th house and with Mercury and Mars together. And then I started to analyze the sign Virgo. Virgo is a sign that is known for being very particular, um, calculating, and it can be a sign that is very methodical and planned and very practical. And in terms of horary astrology, Virgo can represent a compartment or the object being in a compartment. With the influence from the seventh house, it could be in a black compartment or in a compartment or in another person's compartment or in a box-like structure. Because Virgo can represent box-like structure such as drawers or anything that is used to store items. The same can be said for Mercury. And so what happened was I went to this store. Um, oh, and one other thing, the moon in this chart is exalted in the sixth house, which reinforced the fact that I was on the road or I was moving or I was in a location that I normally go to because the sixth house can represent travel. All of the Caden houses are said to represent movement and travel because they fall away from the angles. And so I knew that it was in a location, and I knew that it was going to be in a location where I had went in, did what I had to do, and I left. So there was another thing that let me know it's not in my house because for whatever reason, I kept wanting to think that it was in my house. And so what happened was I got frustrated. I wasn't really able to kind of think because I was too busy thinking that I was being stubborn, which you can see Scorpio rising. I was being stubborn. I'm a Scorpio sun, which is so funny. I was being stubborn. I was like, I didn't take my ID out. I didn't take my ID out. I didn't take my ID out. It can't, where would it be? But if I had just thought about it, I would have realized exactly where it was at. So a few days after that, I'll say on August 11th, which was 4 days after I had misplaced it, I went into the liquor store. And there was this woman that works there that I'm very friendly with. And every time I go there, we always talk and just, catch up and communicate. And she looked at me and she was like, did you forget something? I was like, no, because I wasn't thinking. And then she pulled out my ID and I was like, you know, and she told me that basically, I guess when I went to pull out my card, because I don't have to pull out my ID at that particular location because they know me. I've already like shown my ID hundreds of times, well, not hundreds, but a lot of times before, so they know I'm of age. So when I went to pull out my card, my ID must have fallen out. And there was another girl in the store that I went to school with that was like, hey, I know him. This is his ID. And so what happened was that the lady that operates the store, she got my ID and she put it in a nice little compartment and held it for me until I came back. And so when I came back to find it, and when I came back to the store just to, patron the liquor store as I have been known to do, I she told me, well, here you go, here's your ID. And I was thankful and all of that. And so I immediately went back to the chart to basically further put the pieces together. So when you look at it, I was right about the object being with another person. I knew it was with another person from the chart, and I knew that I was in a public location, and I knew that it was in a compartment, and I knew that the item was going to come back to me because the moon was applying to Jupiter. See, the moon, this is something known as the translation of light, which is when the moon, in this particular case, it doesn't have to be the moon, it can just be a faster moving planet. But when the moon was going to apply to Jupiter, which is going to be the ID, you could also look at it like this. The moon in Taurus was going to apply trine to Mercury, one significator for the ID, and the moon in Taurus was going to apply to a bodily conjunction with Jupiter, another indicator of the ID, and then it was going to apply to Mars, which is me. That is something known as a translation of light, which is when a planet, a fast moving planet applies to one planet and then applies to another planet. Like it's kind of like the moon is gathering that and bringing it to you. And so um that's how I knew I was going to find the object. And as you can see, this chart is supportive of me finding my ID because I had no intentions on going to the liquor store when I found it. I just went because I was gonna go to the gym and work out, but I saw somebody's car there that I didn't want to talk that I would have talked to. So I thought, well, let me just wait till they leave. And I went to the liquor store. I was like, I might as well go to the liquor store, and then and then I went and did that. And she was like, well, hey, I'm glad you came because I was about to leave, and the other people here, they may not have recognized you and remembered it was your ID. And so it happened in a very kind of faded kind of way, if you want to put it that way. But yeah, I don't want this video to be too long, and I hope I wasn't like just all over the place. But I'll always say if you are into horary astrology and you do misplace an object, just stop and get a piece of paper and write down like everything that you know about horary astrology in terms of objects. Like write down the degree that's rising, write down any planets in their house, and locate the planet that represents you and where is that planet, because that planet is going to show you where you were when the object went missing, which is very, very important. And then you're going to look at the ruler of the second, the ruler of the fourth, and you're also going to look at any planet that may symbolize that object. So if I were talking about, let's say I was talking about, let's say I misplaced a bracelet. Well, in that case, I wouldn't necessarily look at Mercury unless Mercury was the ruler of the second and the fourth. And I would go to Venus because Venus is the universal ruler of jewelry. So you always want to look at the specific rulers via the houses, and then you want to look at the universal ruler, and you want to see how those are all working together. And again, if you see that one of those significators is retrograde, then you can be sure that the item is moving back to you. If the item is in a fixed sign, then that is one that can be good or bad. It can show where the item is staying put and that it hadn't changed location since you lost it. Or it can show where the item may be difficult to recover because the item is kind of wants to stay put. And then whenever you see the sign Virgo pop up, especially if that planet is going to be forming a Ptolemaic aspect with you, aka ruler of the first house, then just know that it may be in a compartment waiting for you. Um, so yeah, they have that. But I thought that was pretty cool. Nothing crazy here, nothing, but I just thought that I would share this little video with you. And if you found this video informative, like this video. If you haven't already done so, subscribe. And I definitely would like to hear your comments in the description box below. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it.